I think you're muted. Oh, I know you're muted, but if you're trying to talk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, this is just a proposal for OIDC authentication. The goal is to enable authentication for organizations in the UI and CLI to restrict what certain users have access to, what namespaces things are deployed to, that sort of thing. And the goal is to implement it in as lightweight as a way as possible that also like delivers the most value for the most, like the biggest variety of users. So right now there's not really any authentication in the UI or CLI, but the goal would be to introduce OICD configuration feature flags so that people can log in with whatever OIDC provider they already have set up. So that might be, Dex, Keycloak, Azure AD. It doesn't really matter. That's on the enterprise to bring their own infrastructure, and they can point it there. Yeah, I mean, the basics is just implementing secure token storage, refresh, and revocation, and then a very simple like foundation for, I don't know if RBAC is the right word, but
No, I think RBAC is the right word. Yeah.
yeah, that would map the OIDC groups to, whatever groups of objects you want to give or deny access to. We want to do that for both the UI and CLI, since you can use both to access these different resources.
So the CLI would just be like token based. It'd be like you would have to get your token somehow. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
I think Dimitri has a hand up.
Yeah, I just want to understand in this case, with this feature, you want to make DEX as mandatory, or you want to keep ability to actually plug different authentication types? Like in the feature itself, I think I mentioned example of Kiali. They provide like a simple authentication, OIDC, token based, when you have like just some predefined generated token and things like that. So are we going to have more like another level of abstraction on this side, or we will say, okay, everything is OIDC anyway? And does it mean like I need to install DEX after this feature is merged?
No, yeah. So the other thing I want this, or in this proposal, would be to make it so that nothing changes for the existing deployments. So essentially all that would happen with this proposal is you have the option to enable, like to add 3 feature flags to the deployment, which points to an OIDC URL. I have them listed down here.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, and then like an ID and secret. Anyways, 3 feature flags, and then that will point to any OIDC compatible infrastructure, right? Which could be any of these. But essentially you wouldn't be required to set these up, right? It could still function exactly as it is, and it would by default function exactly as it is with no authentication.
But in, for example, Helm chart installation, there will be some section saying this type of authorization and so on, right? And
Correct. Yeah, and the Helm
you
chart.
will have like a one which is like a no authorization, and second one OIDC, right? Two options.
Yes. Yeah. By default, no authorization, but you can enable OIDC authorization.
Okay. And can they have some kind of a common baseline kind of base class, base interface, so we can extend it in future? We can bring like some additional,
Like a different authentication
for
type.
example, if someone will decide to make a simple username password, right? How difficult it would be?
Yeah, and I'd like to build this in a way that, like you said, if someone wants to come in and add a different type of authentication, it integrates cleanly with the existing system, right? So then you just have to add, whatever that method
So
is.
from that,
And the user.
like point of view, what are the entities that we need to introduce in order to manage users? And my biggest question was like, do we need kind of a group or something like a group management as well? Because as soon as you have some, external OIDC, external airbag itself usually assign some kind of roles and groups and things like that, right? So, and where these groups will be managed? Like, do we need any group management inside Kagent itself, or everything will be completely outside?
So the tokens and sessions, only stuff that this particular proposal would introduce, would be storing tokens and sessions in a table in the existing database, encrypted. And then
Sessions being the OIDC, sessions being the like OIDC or the I always forget the difference between the two,
Yeah.
but not like sessions in the sense that we already have
The
sessions.
callback, you mean?
Yeah.
yes,
So we need.
So like once you trigger login, right, you'll receive a token and a session. Once that session expires, you have to refresh that session in order to stay logged in.
Yeah.
And that can happen automatically, or you can require it to.
No, we can hold on to the refresh token. That's fine. I think that's the best thing to do.
And then there would also be, like you said, about for the RBAC, we would introduce a single config map that would then take the just the regular Caspin style policies of taking a role or a group and assigning them to the different resources, agents, MCP servers, that sort of thing. And as far as the group names themselves, those names would be coming specifically from whatever OIDC provider you already have. So like if we have DEX, right, we already have a set of groups configured in our organization's OIDC setup. So we would just it would map those names that come with the users, like when the user logs in through OIDC, a set of groups are passed in with that. And all this config map is going to do is just going to map the pre-configured group names that come from the OIDC login to a particular role.
No, because sometimes, like, if you enable a very simple OIDC with Azure, for example, right? It may not send you this group information. It will just validate your email, and you will get only email. And as a minimum, right?
What's it?
Just
introspection or something. No.
So we need to support like use case when you will get only email and no information about user groups, and be able to maybe map it somewhere. Like I like the idea of this config map thing. We can make it flexible. Just one comment which I remembered from some previous discussions. When you have like kind of like a multi-tenancy, let's say, and you have, let's say, two teams working in the same Kagent instance, and they have their own agents, their own kind of subsets. Okay, so they typically call this thing that they use in a way like some kind of virtually application, or I don't know, workspace or something like that, right? Where under it you have like agents, okay, and then everything else. So do you think it would be beneficial in this mapping of user and roles that you have to allow a little bit like additional level, maybe like application or kind of workspace or something like this, which will allow to give, because you see, you give access to all agents, right? Maybe you don't want to give it to all agents, you want to give it only the, I don't know, like IT support, or don't know, the procurement or HR or whatever, just anything.
I feel like we should start with namespaces being that grouping. What do you think?
Kubernetes or additional or virtual?
Kubernetes.
Because one of the feedbacks I've got when we discussed this with our kind of production team and so on, where they run something similar, they actually run it in Kubernetes, but they have this additional level of abstraction for tenants. And so it's when we go in this direction of OIDC and so on, it's very natural to have this abstraction of tenants or kind of groups. Maybe it's a group itself. I don't know. It's we need to see. Maybe it's enough to just to have group.
Yeah, we saw the permissions model, kind of the architecture of that being a separate proposal, a separate task. Because that could bring into like a higher level of organization, kind of like Argo has with like a project. And so maybe there is like a project level that needs to come in where you can give permissions to certain things, and maybe maybe there's like private repos, and then there's public repos that you want to expose certain things, certain agents, and tools, but you don't want to do that with others things, and you want to keep them within your team. Yeah. So I think that might be those are all good ideas, but I think they might be part of a separate sort of permissions model proposal.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I don't think they're what's the word? Mutually exclusive, right? Like I think we can get this baseline in place, and if we decide that we want a more advanced system for the like we want like to layer on a more advanced grouping system, then I think we definitely can.
Yeah, that was my thought as well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just saying that before we go and implement something, and then it will be not reversible, maybe to think if.
Yeah. Think with the future in mind. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, not very distant future, but just a kind of, I think because this is very, very natural. As soon as you grow, you will have like, I don't know, 100 agents. Even the UI already like screaming, it's like too much, right? It's the default view requires some kind of filter.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think I don't have any additional comments. Anyone else, guys, online?
So this makes sense to me. I might have nit like things that I want to talk about the implementation, like the language for the RBAC. I wasn't super sold on, but in general, yeah, I definitely like the direction for sure. I think this will offer a ton of value. I think everyone will be super happy about this. I think this is awesome.
And you mentioned you reviewed some other implementations like Argo, or right?
Yeah,
Josh,
that's kind of how we initially approached this. I don't know if you had anything more to say on that, Josh.
Because you usually, if you just copy paste something which is already proven, it's gives you better chances, like battle tested.
Yeah, and I think OICD is pretty straightforward, right? It's been implemented a million times.
Yeah.
So I think that more of the architecture, maybe creativity, will come around when we try to develop sort of a permissions model and a more of a layered structure to teams or projects or however we define that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, Josh or Colin, that y'all wanted to call out in this design or talk about? Oh, phase 2. There you go.
Yeah. Just some ideas. But again, that's the ancillary to the actual proposal itself.
Yeah, definition of done, I would love. I think we definitely need like end-to-end testing for this. You can use Keycloak. Keycloak can deploy into Kubernetes, so we can do something like that. I see that's your first one, so yeah, exactly.
Some examples of what it looks like. Yeah. I need to update this. We don't have a Kagent config map.
Is everything in the secret?
Everything is just is in the secret and deployed or like configured. Like the current pattern, from what I've been able to tell, is that all of the configuration is done via feature flags into the deployment.
Yeah.
Not via config map.
Yeah, I see it both ways. Config maps can be hard to track. I go both ways. I like typed things, so I like CRDs, but I also don't like creating new CRDs. So I think this is a good. Yeah. Anyway, I think as a sort of, we can get to the bottom of exactly like for the RBAC. I think a config map is good.
Yeah.
Like I think that's a good.
Yeah, this was leftover. I should have deleted that. I just missed it on my review. So yeah, sorry, ignore that particular config map. But this is essentially what it looks like to set up, is these two files, and then you would set this information in the Helm chart. Same with Dex. Okta, it's all pretty similar. We can just put examples.
They just have these like little things, right? These little,
yeah. So cool. Are there any other questions, or is that good?
Regarding tests and like E2E test or something, definitely would require us to add E2E, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And it means we need a Dex installation.
I think Keycloak is the best because you can do like, or can you do Dex from a private key also? Like, can you do a self-contained Dex deployment?
I should.
Yeah. I think that's how we've done it, right, Josh? We have our Dex self-contained.
What do you mean by self-contained?
Like not like you can run it all in Kubernetes, basically, like as part of an end-to-end test.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Like you mentioned that you will use Dex, right, by default, because a lot of people using it with Argo as well, and or you saying that Keycloak is maybe for some people is more default.
I mean, I know that people use
they're
Dex,
both pretty.
but I don't know what's used more out there.
Yeah, it's like the same question that we have, like what default LLM model we have, what default OIDC we have, and so on and so on. Like what will be the kind of dev environment default?
we should pick. There's no environment default, right? Like we should pick one that there's two different things. We need something that we end-to-end test with, and then in terms of docs, we should make sure that we document various, right? Like have like 2 or 3, like Keycloak, Dex, maybe like a bit popular ones. Also maybe like Entra, Google, whatever, because people are using different things. Auth0. Auth0 is a really popular one. But the problem is there's a difference between the ones that are popular and like the SaaS ones and the ones that you can actually deploy locally. So yeah. And those are hard. Like the SaaS ones are pretty hard to have in end-to-end tests. Unless we wanted to have like, unless we could get, the CNCF maybe to pay for like an Auth0 account. Right, and then we could just have a public instance that we use for testing.
From the standard specifications, both Keycloak and Dex are supporting the same level of standards, or one of them is like maybe more recent. Probably we can compare, because I remember Christian Posta was giving several examples with some most latest updates in the specifications for like related to the MCP authorization and so on and so on. So we might be interested to put all of these things together if we will have one component, and we would need to run more advanced authorization flows in future, right? I'm just asking if that will be actually a Keycloak or Dex.
Again, I don't think it matters. For this particular use case, they all support it, right? Like all of them have discovery endpoints with the ability to do like basic OIDC flows, right? Like all of them support that. The question for like MCP authentication, right? That's a different, like totally different. They will all support this flow. The question is just like there are little differences in terms of like what the URLs are, what the, if they do token introspection, what kind of, like there are little differences, but the overall flow should work with all of them. I think we should probably also separate this from things like MCP auth. This is kind of like a standalone, at least for now. I understand maybe in the future we would have all of those, we'd have like the same back end for both. That makes sense to me, but I think let's take this one step at a time. And in the future we can say like, hey, this backend we support for the UI, but it doesn't work with MCP authentication, right? Without something. So
yeah, I'm talking more about this ability when you have a user, let's say, user level tokens, which gives access to something else for MCPs, right? In that like end-to-end flow, you would need to go to this Keycloak, for example, and retrieve the token in order to use it. By the tools and things like that. It's not related exactly to this feature, but related to kind of next integrated E2E and everything. Yeah, you can ignore it for now.
Okay. All right. Anything else from you, Colin? Or do you mind if I take over for a bit?
Yeah, go for it.
Alrighty. So, okay, awesome work. Yeah, I think let's, Colin, do you mind joining the contributor meeting on Thursday, and we can like hammer out the API, and then you could potentially start working on it?
Yeah, sounds good.
I don't want you to, I definitely want you to get started, but I also don't want you to get too far in without an API that is going to change. So cool. All right. So I want to quickly go over, so Brian Fox, he couldn't be here today, but he's been, obviously, as I said last week, he's doing awesome work, and he is interested in cross namespace tool references and came up with a cool, what I think is a good way to do it. And so I wanted to share it with others to see how they feel. So right now, we don't allow cross namespace tool references because there are secrets that could potentially be present in the config in a tool. So what Brian recommended, and I kind of like, is something very similar to the HTTP route in the gateway API. So are others familiar with how that works in the gateway API? I'm going to take silence for now. So I'll briefly mention, basically, the way route attachments work in the gateway API is it's two-way. So the gateway says essentially which, it basically says where it's allowed to, where to look for backend refs, like where it's accepting them from, and then the route says who's allowed to use it. Now, in this case, so for example, the gateway would say these are the different kinds of allowed routes on my gateway, but then the route actually says but then the route basically, so the gateway says this is who's allowed to attach to me, and then the route says, okay, I want to be a part of this gateway. Now this one would be slightly different. It would actually be like flipped. So in this case, what Brian is recommending is basically for the remote MCP servers to have a new allowed agents field, basically. And what that allowed agents field would do is it would say, and this allowed agents field would by default limit who's allowed to talk to it, specifically to it's to its own namespace, right? So it's specifically limited to agents in its own namespace. But you can say, allowed agents namespace is all, and then any agents from any namespace are allowed to use this tool. Or you could say, agents from namespace foo, or agents from namespace with selector foo, whatever it is, something like that. And so the idea is then that basically you, as the tool owner, can decide who is allowed to access your tool. Now, the interesting thing about this is that, so the way that, again, this is different from the way the Gateway API does it, because they do it on the parent, because the child is the one attaching to the parent. But in this case, it's just that the parent is selecting the child. And so what you're doing is you're saying, and the child is saying, you're allowed to select me. Now, the way the Gateway API, there's another way the Gateway API does this. It's called reference grants. That's another, so that's how they actually do sharing. Typically, that's how they do this system. That's how they do sharing for references. But honestly, reference grants are cumbersome and kind of annoying because they're a generic API that basically says, this thing in this namespace is allowed to reference this thing in this namespace. So it's very generic, right? And it's kind of divorced from the object itself. So it has that benefit, but it's a little bit more cumbersome and a little bit more complicated. And so Brian decided to try this first. So yeah, just wanted to get others' opinions, as well as potentially others' thoughts if this is something they've run into, how they feel about it.
In addition to the Gateway API, you have also network policies, right? It's maybe more close to network policy.
So it's a little bit different. Network policy is kind of post facto, right? Network policy is these things are already. Network policy is more about who's allowed to talk to who, right? Assuming that there's already sort of.
This is the same thing. Which agent wants to use which tools?
But network policy
it's kind of the same semantics, right? It's.
Yeah. So I would say network policy is most similar to the reference grant, though, because it says basically, right, this thing is allowed to talk to this thing. And the upside, I think, of what Brian did is that it's directly on the server. So the server owner gets to decide when creating the server who has access to it, rather than needing to create another CRD.
Yeah, but he has allow.
Sorry.
Wouldn't be the same thing if you just have, let's say, you install Kagent with watch namespaces and you just set like your couple of namespaces and the same thing just works within those boundaries? Or like
But
what
this is specifically on a tool level, right? So this is saying that like
yeah,
I'm team blah blah blah, right? And I have access to this some namespace, right? And I have an MCP server, but I only want certain people to use it, right? I only
yeah,
want
but
certain other names.
my concern is like not you're trying to solve it logically on the CRD level, right?
Hmm.
But if I run my own agent and I can technically connect to that port, if I know the address of that tool, what will stop me?
So this is specifically this. So I see what you're saying, but this is actually because there are secrets. So you're right. Nothing. Like
Nothing. So
I mean, but
it's
it's the
not a
same thing with the
protection.
gateway API,
It's
right? It's the same thing with the gateway API. You need like the gateway API assumes basically that is handled on another level, right? This is about sharing resources. This is assuming that you have some system in place. Now, I agree with what you're saying, right? But this
no,
the
but it
gateway
needs to
API
work.
and this,
It needs to block it in the real way, right? If I will be interested very much in what another team doing with their Kubernetes access with cluster role, I would be able to call it directly. So this model is not protecting me.
Yeah, like from that, I'm assuming that like nobody else can access it, not just from like it sounds like this may be just from like a UI perspective, maybe. But like that assumes to me that says this is really blocked. Like there's no access, there's no route, there's no network access to it at all. I think that needs to be part of the implementation.
but there's no way. I mean, Kagent is not a service mesh.
Yeah, that's correct. That's basically has layers that we need to have a service mesh on top or something, but it can also have some authorization and other things which done by another tool, which is Agent Gateway.
No, I mean I agree with you, but I don't. Okay, I'm a little worried.
I mean,
about
you are trying to build the permission model without proper tools to build it, without using the right things, which we know in production you will use, like Agent Gateway and other things, policies, and so on and so on. So then why we should spend time and overcomplicate this remote namespace thing? It looks a little bit like too much effort and very small protection.
So part of the problem is that, like, just strictly, like, let's not even talk about, like, strictly from a API cleanliness perspective, right? Like right now, we can't share these tools across namespaces because these tools potentially have access to secrets, which means that if you are running an agent in your namespace and another person is running a tool server in their namespace, right? If you reference that, like the way that the system works, if you reference a tool, you can gain access to secrets in their namespace, right? Which is an anti-pattern, right?
You mean the controller will mount the secret? This is the problem you're trying to solve?
Yes. Like, okay, in the case of a remote MCP server, right? Imagine you have a bearer token, okay, that you use to connect to that remote MCP server, right? If you have an agent in namespace X and the tool server is in namespace Y, okay, and the Y team has set up this remote MCP server with their credentials in their secret, right? You in namespace X don't necessarily have access to that secret. So you can't, right now, you cannot access tools in any other namespace because you may be sharing secrets. And so we need to, now the solution here does not need to be, this does not need to be the solution, right? We can come up with a million different creative solutions, but the problem is right now we can't share tools because of it. Now, another thing I've thought about is removing secrets entirely from this API, and putting them in a separate, essentially like a separate API, which would, but again, it doesn't really solve the like, but I think fundamentally, right, like you may want to attach CA certs, right? Like there are secrets that you potentially want to use in your in your tool server. And so how do you share those secrets, basically, in a way that is not leaking sensitive data?
And what kind of secrets you're talking about as example?
Bearer tokens, CA, like CA certs. I mean, CA certs aren't as important.
Isn't it the same thing that will be stored like in Keycloak?
Assuming you don't have a hard-coded token, yeah. But a lot of people,
because
this
is the right way of doing things, right? Like you actually can authorize the user with OIDC, and then after that you can go and fetch things on demand. You don't store it and you don't share it.
The right way would be to pass through the token, correct?
Yeah. And even the tools, even the tools needs to, you are not sending token via requests, but actually tools will be on your behalf getting permission from Keycloak.
In an ideal world, yes.
Like we are this elicitation, or how it's called. It's complicated names.
Yes. I'm a little worried though that that's not how it works in practice. And again,
can we discuss it with Brian maybe once more, like his particular use case and what kind of secrets and tokens here? Because I think in the current way, it's not really protected. If someone wants to call it, he will call it. If someone will, even if you create a Kagent Kubernetes agent, default one, with cluster permissions, you can retrieve any secret.
No.
Yes.
With the tools.
Yes, resources.
Yes.
You have cluster permissions. So I think our this security permission model should be discussed maybe more.
All right. Yeah, we can definitely take this up with Brian. Again, I think the main thing he wants is right now all references have to be single namespace. And I think he wants more flexibility. That's really the goal here, is that right now everything, all agent to agent, agent to tool, all of it has to be single namespace, and I think he just wants a little bit more.
And your assumption, you have one Kagent per cluster, right? And you don't have, for example, 2 Kagents running like in the blue-green or staging production.
It's not about staging. It's about different teams, right? You don't want to create or something. You know what I mean? Let's just wait. Let's wait till Thursday.
Yeah.
He's going to come.
Let's discuss more. Yes, I would like to understand. Because we basically now running this in one cluster, but 2 instances as well. I just want to understand like the different models and what is the requirement. So best if we can, match. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
That makes sense to me. All right. Does anyone else have anything they want to chat about? We're almost out of time, but got a lot done today.
I have topics, but it's for maybe for Thursday. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk Thursday if nobody else has anything. All right. Awesome chatting with y'all. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Enjoy your afternoons or evenings or mornings, wherever you are. Have a good one. Bye.
Oh, see you.
Bye. Bye, guys.